Hi, guys. My name is Tyler Beckley, and welcome to the Barbells and Black Belts podcast. This is episode 4, and today my guest will be John Bowman. He is a 5-time All-American discus thrower. He is also a YouTube and Patreon influencer, and we will be talking about a lot of topics on sports, coaching, international travel, a lot of John's coaching at the international level as well, and yeah, we're also going to be talking about some of our online presence and coaching and some of the things that kind of makes us move each day as well. Hope you guys enjoy it. See you guys soon. Hi guys, my name is Tyler Beckley, and welcome to episode 4 of Barbells and Black Belts. Today I will have my friend John Bowman. He's an All-American discus thrower. He is also a professional. He's competed professionally at the world level in discus throwing. He is a Patreon and YouTube influencer and online coach, and he's also one of my friends and a member at Finley Barbell, my gym. So, John Bowman, thank you very much, man, for coming on the podcast too. So,
I'm excited.
First thing, John, tell us a little bit about yourself and kind of your rise in athletics, man.
Okay. So I am a discus thrower, and that's how I'll say like this. One of the things that makes me tick or get up in the morning is my pursuit to throw the discus farther. This starts back in junior high. I did track because my friends were doing track and field, and I chose to throw shot put and discus because my friends were. That was in 7th grade and age around 13, and pretty much since that first season, I was hooked with throwing discus specifically, and one way or the other, that has kind of put me on the path of life that I've been on. So I did track in, of course, middle school and in high school. I also had some success. So a quick side note, you may not know this. When in high school, my sophomore and junior year, I started to grow taller, and I got faster. And so my coach was like, hey, we need someone to do hurdles. You're tall. Can you do that? Long story short, I was the state champion in the 110 high hurdles my senior year in high school.
Awesome.
I also, of course, threw the discus, but I never went to state in high school as a discus thrower.
That's fun.
It's hilarious.
I know what I do know.
So when I went to college, I was actually recruited more so to possibly do hurdles or the decathlon. And at that time, that was fine. Like I was here to track helped pay for school, of course, and then just an athlete, just wanted to compete. Mm-hmm. In my freshman year in college that fall, it sounds silly, but I was laying in my dorm room, and I was just laying there in the bed, and I thought, what if I gave everything? How far could I throw? So that would have been like October of 2005, and that was the very moment when I was like, I'm going to throw the discus as far as I can. So I wrote this long email to my coach, was like, hey, this might sound crazy, but I want to throw the discus and I want to throw it far. And he was gracious enough to say, okay. And so that was my freshman year in college. And that's kind of what started the engine of what is now what I have done as an athlete and then as a coach, as a thrower.
You pretty much covered, it says, one of my next questions I was going through there.
Oh, okay, sorry.
It says, when did you know that throwing was your passion?
Yeah.
So that's one of the things that each time that I get a guest onto the podcast, it's like, Todd has a really similar story from our last month's podcast. Todd talks about when he was in high school and he had these kind of moments like, hey, wait a minute, I could do this good, or what I'm saying? Like some of us kind of know when those moments were, because, we live inside of our own heads and we're the ones that say like, okay, what if I actually cared and we have an honest moment? What if I actually did make a good effort on my homework, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's like those are fun things to know too, because that's like some people watching the podcast, or maybe like one of my jiu-jitsu students or something too, that that's, if they're looking for that moment too, that's like, sometimes that's nice to be like, okay, well here's what I said to myself too. Like, what if you said, what if I really tried? How far could I throw?
Yeah.
Like, what if I really and you wanted to do that. And so, like, yeah, here we are. So for the viewers too, this is a thing that each week when I have someone talk about their like accolades, it's kind of weird to talk about that. Like, I'm just going to sit around and tell you like how cool I am or something, you know? So,
Right.
but
Yeah.
let's keep going with the story. Tell us about college then too.
Yep. So in college, I went to Indiana Wesleyan University, which is an NAI school in Indiana. And that conference and I guess area, I was able to have a fair amount of success. So I ended up throwing around 50 meters or 165 feet in the discus as a freshman, and that got me to the NAI national meet. So I think I made. That trip. So nationals that year was in Fresno, California, and I got food poisoning in that trip. So that happened. I got sick, and then 2 days later I threw. Of course, I didn't compete well or whatever, and that was kind of rough emotionally, you know, because like you had all. I went from being a skinny fit hurdler to more of a thrower. I wouldn't say I was big by any means at that time, but I had tried and I trained and I lifted weights and threw the best I can. And then to have like, you know, your season end so badly, like, you know, out of my control. It's not like I could have done something different. I guess I could have not eaten the burger, but I didn't know, you know.
I get you, yeah.
So that was that. But the following 3 years, I had quite a bit of success. So I ended up one of the traits about me as an athlete that I think that makes me excel as an athlete is my ability to learn skills. It's why I was a good hurdler. It's why I was a good discus thrower.
Yeah.
And at the level that our school was at in our conference, if I threw the javelin or if I threw the shot put, if I threw the hammer, I was going to score at the conference meet just because I was an athletic guy. And then I could generally pick up on skills relatively quick. And but because I did some training in shot put and hammer and javelin, I ended up being a 5-time All-American. 3 were in discus, and then 1 was in the hammer throw. And actually, this is funny, 1 was in hurdles. So as a freshman, I could still hurdle, and so I was an All-American in the indoor 60-meter high hurdles.
Nice.
I was the biggest kid running down the track, and it was funny because people kind of knew me as a thrower and like, what are you doing? And I'm just running some hurdles. Don't worry about it, you know. When
I came out of high school, that was my first big one was track that I was all state in or anything. I ended up being 5-time all state in track and once in football, and also it was how do I put it? Like whenever we were growing up, you know, it was how do I say this? Saying some of our accolades that we do in college or anything else too. I guess the biggest thing that I try to find out of some of these interviews is like that perspective of what some of those turning point moments were for you too. Okay. And like when you started figuring a couple of those things out, you know, like you were saying, you gave us a couple of things, like you started to get a little bit bigger too, and like how big, you know, of a guy you were, and then your passion for throwing. So how was that when you were very successful in hurdles? So like you tell me you're an All-American in hurdles. For like, where was your brain at where it was like, all right, I want to throw now, you know what I mean? Like what was the jump on that one? You know?
How do I say this? I actually, looking back, was confused a lot of the times because like I would say my desire to throw the discus and throw it really far, be the best in the world, like that mindset was unchanging, and that was deep rooted, and it wasn't going away. And it's almost like I couldn't control that one. It was like I have to try this. Okay. But then because I was capable out of other things, I had a lot of outward pressure and other people giving me advice, people I love, you know what I mean? But like, so there's a lot of times I was confused, like what should I do? I don't even know. And so there was a lot of just emotions about that and a lot of uncertainty. Like looking back, it's a little bit more clear, but in the moment it was tough. But what I ended up the way I pursued it was I figured if I got stronger, I could jump higher if I could do everything better. And fast forward to now, that has proven very true. I mean, as you become, as long as you're fit and if you get your squat better, you're probably going to be faster unless you gain a ridiculous amount of weight. But you know what I mean? Like if you're stronger, you're faster. And so there was, in that transition time was, I just figured as long as I'm training 100% hardcore, the chips are going to fall where they're going to fall. And then, so to give a frame of reference in how I grew over my college career, in high school at the state meet, I probably weighed 175 pounds. My freshman year, at the end of my freshman year, I probably weighed right around 200 pounds. And then about 10 pounds, then the next year about 210, and then 220. And then when I was actually at my very best as a discus thrower, I weighed, I think the day I threw my PR, I weighed like 235 pounds. And so that's kind of, and I'm about 6'2", you know. Those are kind of the stats or whatever.
Yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, so as I got bigger though, and as running, and actually as I had more success, like even at the conference level and whatever, my coaches didn't care what I was doing. I was scoring in 4 events. What else, you know what I mean, could I do? So it was all okay. It worked out. It worked out pretty good.
When I was in high school, and track ended up starting for me as a way from my mom to make sure that I didn't get in trouble.
Sure.
And he was also my football coach. Shout out Change Kobe. But do you remember Coach Jacoby? Yeah, man. So that's how it started. But my passion was football. So I guess what my segue was to, like, people saw like me being really successful in track, and I went on to play football because again, that was kind of my passion at the time as well. I wrestled as well. I knew I wasn't going to go for wrestling, but oddly enough, that's what got me into grappling and fighting, and everything else was a little bit of my passion for that too. So, and things change over those times too. I mean, that's something that, you know, some people don't understand when you see, like, okay, you've played now on multiple teams, and I'm guessing at the world level, you know, you saw more people that were even more dedicated to what they were doing then.
For sure.
When you get to that point, it's like, yeah, this is what you do. You know what I mean? There is no like, oh, it starts to feel like a job. We got that in college a lot. You know what I mean? This kind of feels like a job playing football. And it's like, well, you got a scholarship. It kind of is, you know? I mean, there's a little bit of that more maturity that needs to happen. But the other side of that coin is some people, they learn to that, like, what their passion is. And sometimes it's probably, you know, what if it's not soccer? You know what I mean? What if it's not throwing or volleyball or something? For me and you, it kind of still was sports, and it still is, and it probably always will be a part of us. But some people, I think, they go through some of those transitions, and it's tougher too. So, I mean, you were telling me, you were doing you know, being so successful, and you're like, I want to do this though too. So, I guess that's my next one is to build on top of that and talk about some of the international things. Me and John have talked in the gym when we were in there. We've lifted together a couple times and just kind of learning a little bit about each other's stories. Tell us a little bit about your international trips too, and some of, like, past the college even too. Yeah.
So I'll give you the little rundown. So in my senior year in college, I ended up. So again, I was going to a small school in Indiana, and I was having success. Sounds cocky. I'd go to a meet and I'd win by 30 feet. You know what I mean? From just the area I was at, there was nobody else at that level. So my coach sent me to a real famous track meet, Mount Sac Relays in California. And that meet is huge. It has your elite division, your college division, and then there's just several divisions. Anyways, my distance that I had at that time, my best was 58 meters, which was like 191 feet, something like that. Pretty respectable toss for a college thrower, and that got me in the elite division. So I was like 8th or 9th. So I'm looking in there, and these are all the Mount Sac Relays is where a lot of professional athletes would maybe even open up their season. I think it's in April or something like that, kind of early. And as I looked at the flight, you know, that I was in, I was looking at some of my heroes, like, that are currently throwing. I was like, I was terrified. It was just like, what in the world? Like, Long story short, I went to that meet. I ended up placing like 7th. I moved up a couple spots. I had a good throw. I ended up being, I think it was 189 feet, something like that. It ended up being the farthest throw of my senior year of that. But anyway, so after that, after that season, my wife, because at that time my wife and I had gotten married, and we agreed like let's give this another year or another shot.
Yeah.
So we actually, through the internet, somehow met with this coach from Hungary. His name was Paul Czar. I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right or wrong. We flew him over to here, and he trained me for, I don't know if it was 3 weeks or 4 weeks. Mm-hmm. And that was the first experience that I had of like your non-normal setting. So this guy had worked with some professional throwers from Hungary. He threw himself for, I don't know exactly know his story, but it was the strangest 3 weeks because he barely spoke English. What we would do is we would go out and train.
That's awesome.
It was, as I think back to this, it was wild. Like he stayed in our house with us. Like I don't even know this guy. Like we just went for it.
Should we lock the doors?
Yeah.
Like what should we do? No, it's going good. Yeah, it's just go ahead. Yeah, sorry.
And so we would have a session. He would like only say a handful of cues. Mm-hmm. Now looking back, he was spot on, and he was teaching me things about technique that I had not yet known or didn't understand about like a higher level of ability or throwing.
Yeah.
He had trouble communicating that, so he would draw me pictures, and then we'd go through and we'd go to the track or to a workout. He'd be like putting my body in strange positions, like, do you understand or whatever? And I'm just like, I guess. And it was just like the 3 or 4 weeks was there. I learned some stuff, and that opened my eyes that if I wanted to throw really far, it was a whole new thing. And it was different. It was different from what I knew. It was different. It was like you become the event, which, and it makes sense now. Like anybody who is at the absolute best of their game, you're one with the sport. Anyway, so that was kind of like a one-off moment, and it was a year and a half after that. We could talk for hours. So the best discus thrower at the time, there were a couple guys professionally. You had Gerd Kanner and Virgilius Alekna. And they were both from Europe. And I just loved watching them because I was an aspiring discus thrower. These guys throwing 230 feet, 235 feet. And it was just like, that's what I want,
Yeah.
And I had emailed Gerd Kanner's coach because that's the kind of guy I was like, if I want to work with him, I should just probably email him.
Why not? Yeah.
Well, I emailed him in the spring of 2010, and I didn't hear anything, which is what I expected. Well, I get an email from him in September of that year saying, let's have a phone call. So we hopped on a phone call, and he said, yeah, I'll work with you.
That's awesome.
My hero, Gerd Kanner, and then his coach, the best discus coach in the world, agreed that he would train me. And so it was on a consulting basis, and that's what started. So in December of 2010, I went to my first training camp in Växjö, Sweden. And it just was a total mix of emotions. It was exactly what I wanted to do. These were with the people that I wanted to be with, and it was terrifying. Cuz I'm just a kid from Ohio, I don't know anything really. I don't have any really experiences outside of the United States. I didn't travel or anything. So there's a humongous wake-up call of catching trains and trying to interact with people who don't speak English, or at least very little, and then trying to absorb everything I absolutely could.
Yeah.
So that was the start in 2010. It was a training camp. I think I was there for 14 days or 21 days. We stayed at a hotel, and there was this indoor sports complex that the city owned, humongous. Like indoor soccer, or all the training you could ever think of, and he taught me how to throw, and blew my mind on whatever I thought, because he had me throw, and he said, you throw like this person specifically, He said, "You need to change that." I was like, well, "That's the person I've been trying to copy." He's like, "It's wrong."
Yeah,
it was
John
very,
throws. Yeah,
it was
I get
very,
it.
very. It wasn't mean at all, but it was just like, if you want to throw well, this is how you do it.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just was in a spot where I was like, okay. So I shed all my thoughts about discus. I'm just going to listen. I'm going to just do what he says. And that was the first my international, just like a training camp in Sweden in the winter. We just threw twice a day and lifted twice a day. It was just like the dream.
I got a lot
Yeah.
to unpack with this one, man. That's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
Like so a couple of points. The
Yeah.
big one that I think too, like the last thing that you said, John, that's I actually just talked to one of my friends about it, the Book of Five Rings.
Okay.
I put quotes up on Finley Barbell,
Yeah,
you know, and the fifth ring is nothingness. It's about losing your ego, about
Mm-hmm.
dropping that kind of guard that's like, well, I know this about throwing.
Yeah.
I'm a damn All-American or something.
Yep.
You didn't have that, and you were able to progress further
Yeah.
because of your ability to say, all right, well, what's this guy that's the best in the world got to teach me? I'm going to listen. And you've said a couple of words. I sponged everything up. How
Yeah.
can I learn? I mean, you were finding ways to learn from a guy who barely spoke English, which is fun.
Yep,
In Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, we get this a lot. They're like, so when they're teaching moves, like a lot of the guys, like my professor George,
Yeah.
very good English too. George, if you watch this, I'm not making fun, but he's like, he talk like, you know, he'll say like this and he'll snap his fingers. It's like, so he knows a way to teach you. And I've had guys that did not have very good English, and by God, I learned jiu-jitsu from them because they figure it out how they're gonna convey to John, drawing a picture. I thought that was awesome too, by the way. But it's like, I think that's the most important thing you said, like on there, is like, that's the reason why John was able to get better, is because John dropped all of his preconceived biases and said, all right, I'm here, and I'm here to learn, you know? And that's awesome. So like the next thing on this one too, so you were over in Sweden for, how long did you say you were over for training camps?
I think usually they were, 3 weeks long.
Mm-hmm.
So I only, it's bittersweet. So I worked with this coach, Coach V, we called him. His name was Vestin Hafsteinsen. He's Icelandic, and he was a 4-time Olympian in the discus. He holds the Icelandic national record, I think, every age group from like youth all the way through pro. This is just a monster at discus.
And too, by the you know what I mean? What a name!
Just the true Viking, you
yeah,
know.
Yeah.
And that was him as an athlete. As a coach, he coached Olympic and world champions in discus and in shot put. And so obviously the track record's there. And his goal as a coach was, how many medals can I win? Or you know what I mean? Like a medal would be, you know, gold, silver, or bronze at any sort of world championship or European championship or Olympics or, you know, anything big. And oh man, I lost my train of thought there for a second.
You were talking about the coaches in Sweden. That's okay.
And we were talking about like the camps and how long.
How about the next where you went from there? Any other places that you went for camps too? Yeah.
So I did a total of because I had only a 2-year period working with him. I went to I think 4 or 5 different camps. So his company was called Global Throwing, and so he worked with athletes from many nations, and that was his thing. And you know, we're talking like you know, he had, of course, the Scandinavian countries because that's where he resided, but then South Africa. I mean, just all over.
Sure.
And so the way his system worked was he did I think it's right, a 3-week camp 10 times a year. And so they'd be all over the world. They'd be, you know, in Europe or in South Africa, or they'd be in the United States. Like they'd be in different spots. And over my 2 years, I went to, I think, 4 or 5 of those camps. So one was in Växjö, Sweden. One was at the U.S. Olympic Training Center in Southern California. So I spent some time there. We did one at BYU in Utah, and then I did another one in Sweden. Yeah, so I guess it was 4. Those are the 4 times, and they're roughly 3 weeks long, and it was just like you throw 2 times a day. Because his point was, while I have you at the camp, I'm going to teach you what you need to learn. And then when you go home, you train it. And then you're going to come back, we'll just reevaluate, which was the first time I'd ever experienced that type of system or methodology. I feel like it's brilliant because like when you have he's a very intense coach. Like he was with you, on you, like putting you in positions, like it was hard work for him too. And I feel like when you train someone like that, now as a coach, as I have trained people, like you can wear out that relationship a little bit. So if you have a couple weeks of hardcore and then you break off a little bit, it's actually really healthy. Then you come back together. You know what I mean? And that it's probably not the only way to do it, but it definitely was working.
This is another one where I say me and you could talk about that subject for an hour, right? It's like, so what you said was like he was so much more of a harsher, like, I don't know, would you use that word? Yeah. And so sometimes like if you had that week in and week out and week in and week out, you'd be like, yo, bro. But since you had a little like, I'm ready to get yelled at by this guy again, you know?
Well, he's like, kind of, so a lot of us were in our, 20s. So he kind of in a way was like a father figure. And like if you were out of line, he'd tell you, you know what I mean? And which is great, honestly. Like,
sometimes,
like a mentor.
I mean, these days, and conversations that I have with adults in BJJ, we use it as a metric sometimes because when we're away from a coach, for instance, we have to be that person for ourselves, and that's a real hard lesson to learn. Like me personally, I don't know if, like you said, like the yelling and screaming, and I had an old school college coach that was real like, Bear Bryant style, but I responded to that a bit. Apparently, you know what I mean? It was just kind of, I was used to it a little bit. Maybe that's the way, maybe that's not. But either way, it's like you have to, that reaction to the coach is what sparks that. You know what I mean? That's a whole, we could talk about coaching philosophies
for sure.
Then my next one, about your international too.
Yeah.
About, these are more for, because people will ask me questions about people I have on the podcast, and they genuinely do want to know like particular things, like something you would often ask someone like, what was Sweden like, So I got 3 different things.
Okay, yeah.
Says, which country was your favorite for a couple of things? Okay. And first one's food. What's your favorite country that you went to about food?
So if I'm 100% honest, I don't even remember. So these camps for me or experiences were sounds strange, but it was kind of hard to be present. There was so much going on. The pressure was, maybe it didn't have to be, but I was still such a young professional athlete. The pressure was humongous. And it was almost like in fight or flight constantly.
You didn't pay attention to things like, I get what you're saying. Yes.
Now, I spent the most amount of time in Sweden. And so I just remember eating a lot of potatoes and meat. So it was good.
We went to, when I was out in Abu Dhabi, and everything was hammerfish all the time.
Okay.
And they're like, we always have hammerfish. And I'm like, I'm tired of eating hammerfish. Like, they're like, it's in such, abundance around here. Yeah. I'm like, yeah, okay. You're like, I'm done with it, So that was potatoes.
It was potatoes.
Go ahead.
A story. So this is me being just like an ignorant, like young man traveling.
You're like, I'm just trying to do my lessons right and get my weights lifted. Yeah,
and so we were staying at this hotel, and I would just eat. This hotel had a restaurant, down whatever. So I would just pretty much every meal I would just eat there, and it wasn't enough food. And
was their portion sizes smaller?
Well, it was, and then it was like I didn't have endless money, so it was just like kind of tight. And I just remember being hungry and weak, like we're training so much, and I had not enough food. And but it was potatoes. It was every time. Which was I suppose that was good. A lot of carbs.
I wanted to, at least because one of my students asked me this one when I was telling him about the prep for the show, and he was like, "Well, what's your answer?" And I was like, Toronto. I'm like, shout out Toronto, Canada, and there's such a blend of cultures.
Sure.
Like whenever I go up there with my friend Josh that I told you owned Toronto BJJ, Josh is like, what ethnicity do you want? And then I will tell you your options. Okay. And it's like, I was like, Korean. And he was like, that's easy. You want to eat Korean barbecue? Okay. You want this, And like every place that we went is like really, really good. And Josh is kind of connoisseur, if you will, about those places, but they have so many options and so many ethnic, so much diversity. I'm like, I don't know, I want to try all this kind of stuff. But My next one was culture. Like, which one was that you visited that you thought, culturally speaking, anything stand out to you?
I'll give you two examples. So in Sweden, I was probably the most attracted to that environment. So first, just the like, I'm a lumberjack too. And we could get into that another time.
I didn't even write in the title. This guy's a lumberjack, by the way. Yeah.
Sweden's covered in trees, and it is just trees and lakes, and it is gorgeous. So like we would just drive around, there'd be a moose, like next to the road, and I just loved it. But one of my most vivid memories is I went to a meet in Estonia, which was like, it's not Russia, but like very close to that area. And all of the buildings, it was like we flew in and we took we had some driver, drive us to this old school is where all the athletes were staying for this competition. But it looked like all just the concrete buildings, like a scene out of Call of Duty or something. It was just like no style. It was really like heavy and like, whoa, where are we? Kind of thing. And that was I would call it a culture shock, but like it was like
I have these moments when I travel sometimes, and I'm from a little small town. Chris is that's our social media guy here. He's from the same high school as me, oddly enough, and we're from a little small place. And I've had these moments where you're in the world and you're like, bro, I'm on the other side of the planet. Yeah. I got over here in a big giant plane that went, how many 100 mile an hour, and some of those points like that I've had, like we went to Ireland, like standing on a cliff or something like that. And sometimes you get those, like just looking at the buildings and stuff, and you're like, bro, this is someone's life is here. You know what I mean? And that's like, sometimes that's why I encourage everyone to travel and see other people's life and see what they do too. But anything else that would like stand out to you in terms of like something like that?
The other thing was, so that I competed in, I was only in 4 different countries. So it was Denmark, Sweden, Germany, and Estonia. And I remember flying to Germany. It was so what had happened is, this would be the summer of 2011. I flew out to Europe for a training camp. It was also going to be like a circuit where I was going to compete in some meets. I competed in my first Grand Prix meet and whatever. But I was almost always with somebody because I was the new guy. I didn't know anything. Well, coach he was also my manager. And so he'd put me in a meet in Germany by myself. So I had to take a train from Vecka, Sweden to Copenhagen, Denmark, and then from there go to the airport and fly to Germany and do all that by myself. And so I was looking back, that's very cool. I'm proud of myself. Like I did some hard things. But I remember walking out of the airplane in the Germany airport, and somebody had a sign with my name on it. I don't know who, it was just the driver, Yeah. And I remember we got on whatever road it was, and this lady driving we were flying. Like, of course, I don't know, they have the Autobahn or whatever, but like speed was the thing. I mean, I just thought, sitting in the back seat of this car, I was like, I could die today. Like, we're driving so fast. And
we've heard about the Autobahn and stuff, it's like.
And so just like, those are a couple of my highlight memories that I remember as like in a completely new space. Looking back is really fond memories.
When I went over to Abu Dhabi, one of the big things was not only like, signage and things like that, obviously things being in different languages and things, but they have these very big billboards of like the sheiks, the dudes that are like, our father Zaid and stuff. And it was really kind of strange to me. I mean, I'm talking about a billboard that's like the size of an IMAX screen or something, huge billboards. And they would say like, and I'm like, but other places, I mean, it was like the most beautiful paved roads and stuff. And I told my grandpa that it was like Columbus, Ohio, but you put them big old billboards up with, you know what I mean? And it's just some of the things culturally, when we go to different countries that just stand out to us and stuff. It's like, it's really interesting. And again, international travel has just been, I want to do more of that. A couple of our friends actually who I had on my, the podcast first, he just got back from Paris. He took his family over the holidays. That's one of me and Amy's bucket list type things. And I mean, I'm gonna tie jiu-jitsu into it. I'm gonna tell you, I'm gonna find you in Finley Barbell, and I'm gonna be like, hey man, I'm gonna go do something with jiu-jitsu over in Paris or something.
Yeah, right.
some of these things, I not only I like tying my experiences in with these as well if I can. Like when we went to Ireland, we rolled over there too. So I
Okay.
went to an academy in Ireland and we had a lot of fun.
Yeah,
And
okay.
those guys, they still follow me on social media and stuff. And it's like, you know, you meet a bunch of people and just seeing through their ways of life too. It's like it's very, very fun for that as well. Have you traveled internationally like recently too much?
No, I haven't. No, it has been so. The last time, this could be another topic we get into.
No worries.
But the last thing I was competitive in at a higher level was the 2012 Olympic trials. So that was in Oregon, and after that, I had taken 3 years off, like 13, 14, and 15, and then around that time, around 2015 to now, has been me getting back into this, figuring out life, how to be a high level athlete now.
Yeah.
And so I think my future has that, but in the last 10 years I haven't done
I
it.
love that enthusiasm. I like the look in your eye.
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
I mean, they can't see that, and I did. You know, that kind of stuff is. It's going to lead me in my next thing too, which is your Patreon too.
Yeah.
And a lot of people I've been trying to kind of like cross advertise a little bit, just because a lot of people need to know of things that you have and stuff. And John's the person who got me onto this one. He came to me at Finley Barbell and he was like, "Hey, I'm John. I'm a thrower. I got a Patreon page. I coach a lot, you know." And I was kind of starting to learn about John, and he was like, "I'd like to collaborate on stuff." And this has led us here, obviously, talking. And but it was a new world to me. I only knew Patreon. This is one of my questions, was how you found out about it.
Yeah.
We're big Game of Thrones fans, and there was a guy that was named Smokescreen, and he was a YouTube guy, but he did after show stuff. He said, "Get on my Patreon. This is how I can monetize it a little bit." And so me and Amy, we'd get on after Game of Thrones, the live show. He would do a live thing, and we would like drop $5 at him or something because he would do the live thing. That's the only thing I knew about it. And then I met John, and John was telling me about the Patreon page where he had, gosh, he said a couple thousand people that were signed up under the email list and, you know, paying members on this one. And he's basically been able to turn his, you know, passion for throwing and now passion for coaching throwing too.
Right.
And, you know, monetize it to branch it out to more people that might not, you know, live in the Findlay, Hancock County area or something too. So John, tell us a little bit about that. Like, how'd you learn about Patreon, and tell us about your page, man?
So my online, presence or whatever started on YouTube, which a lot of Patreon creators do that. In 2018, I had started to teach again. So when I was throwing professionally or right out of college and working with my professional coach, Coach V, and then throwing, like, it's just part of the thing. If you're in it, you're teaching it. It's just part of the game. And then my family, my wife and I, we have 2 kids. We'd moved around a couple of times, and so I had gotten out of this realm of coaching, and it was just different. Anyway, so in 2018, I put out a couple videos, just some like how-to stuff about discus. And I don't even know. I can't even tell you why I did, other than it was like maybe it was just on my mind. And well, those videos got some traction. So then that made me think like, oh, I wonder if I could do something with this.
Yeah.
So for a couple years, I was really consistent in making discus and shot put specific like technique videos. And what I discovered was that's what the world wanted to know. And I was actually one of the first, not the first, but one of the first people to do that successfully on YouTube. So when anybody searched on Google or YouTube how to throw discus, where'd they land? They landed on my videos. And so that engine started in 2018, and then it was 2021. I had made like 200 videos on teaching. I thought, and I had people requesting, can you make like a concise, like step-by-step program? I thought, yes, I will make a course. If you look at other like online entrepreneurs, a lot of people do sell a course when they're teaching a skill or whatnot. So I went down that road and I made a very in-depth course, and this was through a different platform. If you fast forward to now, okay, I'll say it like this. After the success on YouTube, in some degrees being famous is not the right word, but if I could go to about any track meet and people would know who I was because they had watched How to Throw Discus,
Sure.
And because of that, as I did research, because like I took courses on how to do YouTube. Like I was learning. I was like, what? How do I make this into something real? To make, because this is an important piece. One of my biggest struggles as a professional thrower was resources and time, and so I could trade time for resources. If I could go get a job and you work X number of hours and you get paid, but then that sucks the life out of training. And so there was this balance. And so when YouTube started to get some traction, I was like, is this the way to where my work is like, was that symbiosis? Like, is a perfect match with the throwing. And that was the dream or the idea in 2018. And I have been working for real ever since on how to solve that, not problem, but like, how does that, because as a creator, I genuinely want my audience to benefit. Because I believe if I can make a truly helpful teaching video or course or system of training, then people will use it, and then I can be compensated, and then we're all happy. Like
I tell it to my wife all the time when we make business decisions. I think the one meeting we had where I was saying the number one goal of a business is never to make money. It's to increase value for shareholders, and that can't be shareholder value on my side. It's got to be on both. So, of course, if John creates a tool, literally, I'm going to talk about that next too. But as in this case, a video, and it creates value for that person, then you have value for yourself too. And it's we could get into an argument about it. And probably not with you. You'd probably be me and you'd be on the same side. Some of these people that make a lot of creative content and they're not being compensated as much, I feel, because they're making so much value and they're not getting a lot of value out of it too. It's again why I try, like, every time that I have a conversation, I try to reap value out of things, and I try to give value to it as well. Yep. And you said a lot of things to me the first time that we met that was very like business oriented. I know you said that wasn't really your background. You own your business and stuff, but you approached your training, your throwing, your Patreon, like good business sound fundamentals too. Like John's like, here's what I want to do, and here's how I have to do it. You laid out a roadmap. You decided in the beginning that this was the goal. This is what I want to do. All right, how do we do this, and how do I manage it? And just, something you said before about balancing my time and resources, like you're making a choice. Like, I'll give you an easy example. I talk to a lot of younger kids and some that want to make a career in, say, MMA, and I'm like, don't drop out of school, I mean, these things take balance, and they take, do you have a wife? Do you have a kid, girlfriend? These things, like, there's a lot to manage and a lot to structure with these ones. So it's great to hear, like, coaching wise, like how you came to it, because it gives you a roadmap of where John was at that point too, and you said, okay, here's the next step of what I'm doing as well. Not to get off the Patreon thing too much, but it's just kind of the things that lead us to these points, in our life, or what could help us the most. Or, I mean, when I heard you say, like, about the videos, you just said it like, here, this will be valuable. Someone will find use out of this. And I think that's kind of, you said you didn't even know why you made that first video. I'm not even sure, but like, talking to you, I bet it was like, this could be helpful. You know what I mean? And sometimes that's like the expression that, like, in my opinion, good creators, like, they answer that question. Not like, what's going to get me the most likes? It's like, boo. That's like, that's kind of a bad way to put it. But how, like, is this something that could help people? Is this something that people would be interested in? You know what I mean? Yep. Or, like, in this case, you're making a resource for them to learn how to throw. I train a junior high kid that I just gave John's contact and everything to his to a kid, and because I'm like, here, I think even if you just watch the videos, like, you're gonna find value out of this thing too, and I'm gonna see if they follow up on it too, and I really do. So again, tell us about the Patreon page and how you've kind of linked that into your coaching and throwing too.
So when I as a YouTuber, as I did research and found other ways, because the problem with YouTube and what I do. So with the Discus video, it is the only people who come across my stuff are people who search how to throw discus or something related to that. Yeah. My content is never viral. Like, it's not cool to the masses. It's cool to us.
It's niche. Yeah.
Us discus throwers. And so how did what I found was other people like that, which there's a million different niches in the world. Patreon was one of those platforms you could use to do that. So what I did, it just started to make sense. I had this course. I have this audience on YouTube, and when I saw Patreon or I saw what was possible, I thought that's the piece that I can put all of this together. And so I was able to take this really in-depth course that was kind of expensive, move that onto Patreon, and then it's accessible to people wherever they're at. So at the time of this recording, my tier where you can get access to the course is $11. So if you really wanted to learn how to throw discus, or if you were a coach and you wanted some points, like, I just need to know what to tell my kids, and you only had $11, you could join for 1 month, watch everything, and then quit. And that's fine. It's there for you. If you're someone who has more resources and wants, because I am continuing, about every month, I'll put out 1 to 2 pieces of content, answering questions, typically is how that goes. Then it's there for you for like that consistent stream or whatnot. But I've found with the size of my audience and it being global, because I've got people from all corners of the world who use my resources, then we can all win. Like, I can provide for my family, and it can support my own training.
Yeah.
Which that is what is the engine that builds my resources. So, like, it's a circle. If I'm able to train, my videos, my teaching is 100 times better, and then that goes to the person consuming or watching it, and then like it just works. And this is the first time. It took me 7 years to come up with a way that made sense for all parties. And so I'm really excited. And I would say the Patreon is still relatively new. I've had it for a few years, but I feel like just now am I like getting my feet going, and I'm like, now I know what to do with it, and I know how to support people, and that's where I'm really excited. And I think this is honestly just the beginning of what's possible.
When I got onto it, I just started first plugging videos on the Finley Barbell YouTube page, and I have that as a resource of just as exercises. It's just here's the exercise, because I use it with my clients. Like, it started with, hey, what's this exercise you wrote for me? And I'd make a video, and now I have like 300 some videos. And it's like, it's just a library essentially. And then I went on to Patreon, and I started doing something like you did, like, hey, make a video, add value, to say something useful. You know what I mean? This is information that I say it like on our YouTube, like, hey, if you want long form content, you want long form coaching, you want kind of the coaching philosophy stuff, programming, then you're here. I think that we're only scratching the surface on a lot of the things that, you could. How many things could you say that could be useful to a middle school or high school track and field coach that's a thrower? You know what I mean? It's you could sit here and tell me a whole bunch of stuff, John, and it would be like, we joked during the beginning of the podcast about how me and John would just like rattle about things we really care about. Like, you get us going, man. You talk to him about throwing, or and that's why I want to listen to you too, by the way. Because you can see my guy Todd last month, he talks about running and talking about jiu-jitsu, and he's just, he's ready to go too. So circling back to, like you said about your Patreon, about using it as a vehicle to make money on it too. If your knowledge is valuable, then that is, you get paid for it. Right. Absolutely. Like, this is how you said the thing. You said it's like a cycle. Like, if I can make a little bit of money on this, it'll help me help more people. And then if I can help more people, I can help myself a little bit, because now I'll have a little bit more time to train. Yeah. And the other thing you didn't say, you've told me before, is, hey, if I don't have to go cut down a billion trees and get real tired and now I can't train, that would be great, because of his lumberjacking job. Yep. And so it works in a cycle, and that is fine for me, because I'm glad that system works, because people are getting valuable information. John is following his dreams and his passion, you know what I mean? And he's monetizing it too. Like, hey, I can put food on the table with the things that I like to do.
Yeah, right.
My nephew, he got done wrestling at Tiffin University, and he got out into the business world, and he found a job working for Rudis, which is a wrestling apparel company. So I'm like, all right, I see what you did there.
Yeah.
You know, he blended his wrestling passion, because they're really big on that. Like, it's like their mission statement. It's like they're going to further the sport of wrestling, you know, in a positive direction. They're going to make, you know, good apparel, you know, yada, yada. But it all started with a base of like, how do we enrich the wrestling community? You know, how do we do this? And he believes in that mission. So that's like, he's like, all right, cool. We saw in shoes, we saw in hats, you know, whatever. So it's like, he doesn't mind it, I think, the same way as like, okay, because I'm adding value to people. Like, if they really enjoy the content and it's really helpful, you know, and if, you know, you help a coach that's now able to help 20 people too.
Yeah,
like
right.
There's some altruism here too. That's just like, you feel good about like, hey, I struggled in these points in high school or college, but boy, this guy from Sweden, he got me right. Like, why was, you know what I mean? I'm sure you had a couple of those lessons like, oh, okay, now I can teach that to people so much easier now too.
Yeah. Coaching world is how much, and this isn't a knock on any coach at middle school or high school level, but how rare good knowledge is. And what I found as a coach, and I am fortunate, I was able to work with one of the best discus coaches in the world. I would even say one of the best teachers. Like, he didn't just tell me information, like he got it into me. You know what I mean? Which is amazing.
It's stuck, yeah.
And so like looking, and as I have coached people, I would say I have 100% success rate, because if you are able to do just one of the concepts in throwing is pushing. We want to push from our lower body and not yank it or pull with our upper body. If you push, you throw farther. I mean, it's A plus B equals C. Like, there is no weighing. So if I'm able to, you know, impart some good information, it literally changes people. So there's this one kid, and this is amazing. I hope he watches this. He is a middle school thrower, and he started sending me videos. This is 100% online. Maybe last spring, so almost a year. And it was kind of rough. It was like, you could tell he was trying to spin, loved throwing discus, had a lot of ability, but it was pretty rough. And now it has been a year, and he has sent me videos every month. He has thrown every week. I mean, it appears unbelievable difference. He looks good. He looks like he's thrown for 5 years. He's smooth. I can't wait for him to throw this season. Like, he's going to throw big PRs. But what all it was the right information with the right kid who just wanted to try. And so what is exciting is with the video content is I'm now able to give good, proper information and broadcast that, and it's going to make a lot of people's lives easier, because a lot of when kids aren't throwing good, or if there's a foul, or, you know, hits the cage or falls out, whatever it might be, they're 100% preventable. So then I'm just able to give, here's the step-by-step, here's what you do. Yeah. And again, if somebody tries, I've never had it fail, because it just works. Like, it's simple stuff.
You sound like, it's funny because I don't know much about the throwing world, and it's fascinating to me hearing what you say. It's exactly the same as jiu-jitsu. Okay. And it's awesome. Because that's what it should be. If, you know, Todd, if you're watching this one right now, like, what he's saying is the same thing we do at seminars all the time, where we just like sponge up this information, and it's like, there's BJJ fanatics, and there's DVDs, and there's a lot of online courses and things like that. There's so many resources, and people in the BJJ community that take advantage of that kind of stuff and that kind of coaching, they get better.
Yeah,
I mean,
right.
It's easy to kind of lose your way. You got to, you know, focus and stuff. But there's so many good resources out there, and for someone to have a vibe of like, you know, I know everything. That's like, bro, like, it's so bad.
Yeah.
That's great to hear that like there's now so many more resources, because if you're our middle school kid
Yeah.
looking to get better at that now, like you said, you have good coaching and good resources. And by the way, it's $11. You know what I'm saying? Is what
Right,
what I heard on
yeah.
that one. And I know you do like personal coaching
Yeah.
and stuff, and you pay for that time there too.
Yeah.
But I mean, a lot of times in jiu-jitsu, we get things that if you package it and deliver it in a smaller box, it's easier for that next generation to come by.
Yeah.
And like we've had a concept, like a move that was early 2010s. It's called a Barbells. It's like you spin underneath them, basically. It was like, man, like a couple of people were doing it. They were super flexible. It was always like, the weird spinny stuff. And it's like nowadays, it's like I see blue belts doing it at tournaments and stuff, because you could get online and type in Barbells. You don't even have to put BJJ. It's a weird word, you know. And you're going to see hundreds and hundreds of videos.
Yeah.
And I'm okay with that, because the secret sauce here isn't in just that 3-week course. It's in now go home and do all the things I taught you.
That's right.
You know what I mean? And it's like, you got to wake up every day, and you got to put your work hat on, and you got to go into the weight room, or you got to go into, what do you all call it? Shot like a discus pit. I mean, how do I got to circle
the discus ring.
Okay, discus ring. I got to say my lingo, right?
Yep.
You know, but it's like, but that's what you got to do it on too. And it's like, it's awesome to sit here and hear a story where you went international to get some of that coaching too, which, hey, USA, we got good coaches over here apparently too, but you went over and did it from some of the best in the world too. And some of the lessons that you have been taught, it seems like now you're packaging them in a very,
Can I tell you a story?
Yeah,
so this could be
man.
controversial depending on who's watching this, but in the world of discus, America's had some problems, I'd say, since the 80s. We had a time where America like ruled the world in discus. We had Olympic champions, Olympic medalists, and then we went a long time with none of that. Why? Because the methods weren't spot on. And so when I sought out Coach V, I just looked at his track record and I thought, he's the best in the world, then that's who I'm going to call. You know what I mean?
Sure. And
then he was able to unpack for me over the 2 years we worked together what I had been taught and why that was wrong. And then here is how you're going to want to do it. And then I went from a pretty good college thrower to, I had the 5th farthest throw in the United States in 2011. Mm-hmm. I weighed 235 pounds, was by far the smallest thrower. Another story is when I went to the Olympic Training Center, I was there for a few weeks. And again, I was training next to some of my heroes. So the American throwers, Ian Waltz, Jared Rome, and some other people. And I was matching them in training. I had some of my farthest throws I've ever thrown were in that training camp, like 65 meters, which is like the Olympic A standard, like some monster throws. And people were like, you just threw that? And that was still when I was so raw and I was new. I was just like, that's Coach V. Like, you know what I mean? He's helping me. But that's what is possible, is to most throwers, if you're watching this, you're throwing, you have it in you to throw much farther. And you just have to be able to unlock it. And that's my goal, is to help you unlock. And again, it's 3/4 your own effort. But if you don't have that quarter, that 25% of really good knowledge, you're going to hit a plateau. You won't be your best. And I feel like with what I have created, like with my resources, what I was taught is what breaks the ceiling for people. I had a girl, one of the first people I coached, like for a long period of time. She started coming to me throwing, like, I'm not kidding, like 70 feet in discus. A couple years later, she was state champion through 156 feet or something like that. I had another girl throw 165 feet in the discus. She's 5'5". Like, it's not like these are giant people. Like, it's when you unlock the technique. I mean, it's just a whole new world and a whole new level of ability.
Yeah.
And the people who have worked with my stuff and have had success, like, that's their experience too. It's like, wow. And so it always pumps me up, because, like, for me, I throw because I'm trying to throw my very farthest. And I genuinely am here. If you want to throw far too, I'll help you. Like,
let's go.
Yeah. Let's go train.
You were So, quick story to start wrapping this up too. You were in the front of the Finley Barbell. Remember when you brought in all your discs and stuff, and Kyle was in there?
Yeah.
And he's like, you go, hey, you want to go throw some things or something? And he's like, yeah, I'll throw some things. Like, you guys looked at each other like, yeah, I like this stuff. I like throwing these objects. And he wanted to check out all like your discs and stuff. And he's like, ooh, yeah. He's like talking about his like favorite shot put and stuff like that. I'm like, I mean, every community has that thing of people that are passionate about it, and it's just awesome to see. Like, I mean, I get really, I guess, it gives me a lot of ideas for things in my own academy, and obviously John's sparked a lot of things business-wise as well. Like, you know, I started a Patreon page because he gave me the idea to it, and, you know, who knows where it goes. We're both just, again, trying to collaborate and trying to add ideas to each other. And, I mean, John, I've really enjoyed our conversation here. I wanted to have it on here at the end. Anything that you want to plug? We talked about, obviously, the Patreon page. We're going to put that down at the bottom. Bowman throws. Anything else that you'd like to talk about?
So the thing, if the first place to start is to go to my website, which is bowmanthrows.com, and on there I have a free resource. So as a discus thrower or a shot putter, you're going to throw your farthest when you're spinning, when you're doing the full technique, the full thing. And so I have 2 drills that are my absolute favorite go-to drills when I'm training and then when I'm teaching someone how to throw. Anyways, I did an in-depth video on my 2 favorite drills to help work on the spin. It's free, but you got to go to the website. That's where you start. If you get those drills, that signs you up for my email list, and I'm always in contact with my community through the email list. And so if you want just the free thing, that's great. If you want more, there's more too, and you learn everything you need to know on my website.
I mean, it's so fun that it's like, again, like you're saying, like you have a lot of good knowledge, you have a lot of good wisdom from not only your travels, but obviously your competition and continuing as well. But I think the one thing that makes me want to keep having conversations with John Bowman is like, John's like, I'm going to keep getting better. And he wants to get better he told me about his throws and his lifts last week. You know, that he's going to be compete at the master level for throwing. And where are you going to travel for that?
So I will go, my home base is Ohio. And so within masters, track and field, pretty much every state has their own association and their own meets throughout the summer. So, but what it comes down to is in the spring, I'm going to compete at some college meets. Most college meets are open to anybody, and I can be competitive, you know, at the college level. And then and that's in the spring. Over the summer, I will compete at some of these masters events, and then there's masters nationals. I will compete at that, and then there are some clubs that host events or whatever, you know, from New York to Oklahoma to California, Texas. So my hope is as the summer goes on, I can do a few of those. The thing that will be what I'm so excited about this year is I feel like the culmination of like 7 or 8 years of like trying to put all the pieces of my life together. I expect to be able to not only complete my lifting workouts and my throwing workouts, but do them well and intentional and like actually get strong, actually lift weights. So we'll see what happens this summer. I hope to compete in 10 to 15 meets. That's where my people are. That's where, you know, and that's where I want to interact with people. And then no use training unless you're competing a little bit. So I'm going to throw as far as I can, I guess.
The last time that my Professor George came up, this was a month and a half, 2 months ago or so, and one of the questions that he got asked by one of my students was about competition, how often to compete. And he said it to my jiu-jitsu club, and he said you should at least try to compete 2 times a year. And he was just saying it as kind of a general thing. But he said the reason why, he's like, because you're going to stay sharp. You're going to want to come to practice. You're going to want to eat the right meals. You're going to want to go to bed. And that's going to keep you sharp and everywhere else, too. And so
I agree.
Tyler is built on competition. It sounds like John is, too. We're just like, I got to sign up for something. I'm getting an itchy hand, and I'm getting bored. And it's and it keeps you going in your sport, too, because I got to keep up with the latest trends, and I got to keep making myself better as an athlete and a coach, too. So, and then maybe we're not, like, again, we're both masters athletes, you know, where I'm not cracking in on the adult black belt level. These guys are so talented, and absolutely, they're pushing themselves. And again, I'm going to say my friend Todd Williams, he said you got to go for your gold medal, and it's like whatever that is, your middle school kid or your high school kid or your college, you know what I mean? At like every level too. So, John, thank you very much for this podcast. We went to about that hour mark too. Okay. We talked about it, or a little bit over, I guess. It's so fun, like, because I was mentioning about coaching philosophies. Like, man, we sit here talking whole podcasts, man. Coaches want to listen and stuff, but it's so easy to get into it because it's things we're passionate about. And I just like my ADHD brain is just going, oh, that's just like jiu-jitsu. Oh, man, that's here too. And it gives me a lot of ideas too. So I want to thank you very much for coming to the podcast, brother.
It was a pleasure,
it was a very good, I hope. Again, with this podcast, my goal is the same thing as what you were saying too, is to increase value. Our conversation sits here. We're having a good time, which is kind of cool. Chris told me that on the way home. He was like, "I like listening to you," and and I'm like, "Thanks, man. That's awesome," because I want other people to listen to the podcast and be like, "All right, cool, man." And if they have something like, I don't know if it's throwing or jiu-jitsu or whatever the heck it is, it's like, go do it. Go do the thing. Like, what do you want to do? You want to paint or, start a bakery? I don't know. Do it. Whatever it is, dog. So thank you guys very much for listening. And, we'll see you guys again soon.